My name is Miles Carter. I'm 35, and I work as a senior brand strategist for a hospitality design firm in Atlanta. Which sounds elegant until you realize half my job is telling luxury hotels that warm minimalism and expensive beige are not the same thing. Brooke worked on the partnership side. She was 33, smart enough to make entire rooms sit up straighter, and competitive in a way that made even silence feel like it had a scorecard. She wore linen blazers in summer, like she had personally negotiated with humidity. She remembered every number, every client objection, every sentence you wished you had not said in a meeting. And she had a talent for looking calm while ruining your whole argument. I respected her deeply, which was annoying. Because respect is much easier to manage when the person is not also beautiful in a way that makes you forget what slide you're on. Nothing had ever happened between us. Obviously, we argued over client strategy, competed for the same promotion, corrected each other's assumptions in conference rooms, and smiled politely while everyone else in the office whispered that if either of us ever quit, the other might lose their favorite reason to come to work. They were wrong. Mostly. The retreat was supposed to be simple. 3 days at an oceanfront resort with the senior team, a few major clients, and a very expensive agenda about alignment, leadership, and relational trust. That last phrase should have scared me. The trouble started before we even reached the island. A storm rerouted half the flights. 2 rental cars vanished from the reservation. Brooke and I ended up in the same SUV because our CEO, Martin, looked at both of us, clapped his hands once, and said, "Perfect. You two can use the drive to stop terrifying the junior staff." Brooke said, "We don't terrify them." I said, "They respect clarity." The intern beside us whispered, "Sometimes I do feel fear." So we drove together. 4 hours. In summer heat. With her sunglasses on, one bare foot tucked under her knee, and a playlist that kept switching from old soul music to angry women with guitars. I expected the drive to be unbearable. Instead, it was dangerous in a quieter way. She made fun of my gas station coffee. I made fun of her emergency snack system, which included almonds, ginger chews, and something labeled calming electrolyte powder. She said, "You mock it now, but when you collapse emotionally in hour 3, don't come crawling to me." I said I collapsed privately. She looked at me over her sunglasses. That is exactly what worries people. That should not have stayed with me. It did. By the time we reached the resort, the sky had cleared into that hot, golden coastal light that makes even bad decisions look cinematic. Palm trees moved lazily near the entrance. Beyond the lobby's glass walls, the ocean flashed blue and bright. People were already walking around with linen shirts, name badges, and the exhausted joy of adults pretending a work trip was a vacation. Brooke and I walked in together with our bags. That was mistake number 1. Martin spotted us immediately near the check-in desk, beside 2 board members and a client named Diane Whitcomb, whose family owned a chain of boutique resorts we were aggressively trying to impress. Diane looked from Brooke to me, then smiled. "Oh," she said, "you two are together." I opened my mouth. Brooke opened hers faster. "No, Martin stepped in with the cheerful violence of a man who had just seen a marketing opportunity. "They're one of our strongest internal partnerships," he said. That was technically true and spiritually criminal. Diane brightened. "How wonderful. I always say the best working relationships have real trust behind them." Brooke's eyes shifted to Martin. If looks could create legal liability, the man would have needed representation. Martin kept smiling. "Actually, Miles and Brooke are leading tomorrow's trust design session." We were not. At least, not before that sentence. Diane clasped her hands. "Perfect. I'm fascinated by professional couples who work together. My late husband and I built our first resort that way. There it was. The trap. Not because Diane was cruel. She wasn't. She was warm, old money observant, and clearly sentimental about the idea of love and business mixing beautifully. The problem was that her company was deciding whether to hand us a contract big enough to reshape the next year of our firm. And Martin had the look of a man silently screaming, "Do not correct the rich woman." Brooke's smile appeared. Not her real one. The polite corporate one that meant someone was about to pay later. She slid her hand lightly through my arm. I nearly forgot my own last name. Yes, she said smoothly. Miles and I work very well together. I looked at her. She squeezed my arm just hard enough to threaten bone. So I smiled too. When we're not disagreeing for sport, Diane laughed. That sounds like marriage, Brooke said. So I've heard. I swear the air changed around us. It lasted maybe 20 seconds, but it was enough. Diane was delighted. Martin was relieved. Brooke was plotting, and I was suddenly part of a fake relationship with the one woman in the company who could ruin me professionally and emotionally, depending on the lighting. Then the front desk clerk handed us the second problem. I have the Turner Carter reservation here, she said. Brooke's head turned slowly. I looked at the clerk. The what? She smiled. One ocean view suite. King bed. Silence. The kind that arrives fully dressed. Brooke let go of my arm. Martin made a sound that might have been a cough or a prayer. I said, there should be 2 rooms. The clerk typed quickly. I'm so sorry. With the storm rebookings and the retreat block, everything is sold out tonight. We may be able to move you tomorrow, but tonight the suite is the only room left under your combined reservation. Brooke looked at Martin. Martin looked at the ocean like maybe it could take him. Diane, unfortunately, looked delighted. How romantic, she said. Brooke smiled again, and this time I feared for everyone's safety. Very, she said. 5 minutes later, we were in the elevator. Alone. The doors closed. Brooke turned to me with perfect calm and said, if you make one joke, I will push you into the decorative koi pond. There's a koi pond? Miles. Noted. The elevator hummed upward. Neither of us spoke for a second. Then I said carefully, for the record, I did not know Martin was going to make us a couple. For the record, she said, if this costs me the promotion, I will haunt your LinkedIn. You think I wanted this? She looked at me then. Really looked. And for one strange second, the anger dropped just enough for something else to show through. Nerves. Not fear. Brooke Turner did not do fear where anyone could see it. But nerves? Maybe. The elevator doors opened. Our suite was at the end of a quiet hallway facing the water. Brooke unlocked the door, pushed it open, and stopped so suddenly I almost ran into her. The room was beautiful. Of course it was. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Balcony overlooking the beach. White curtains moving in the ocean breeze. One bottle of champagne on ice with a little card that read, Welcome, Miles A. Brooke. And in the center of the room, framed by soft coastal light, was one enormous king bed covered in white linen. Brooke stared at it. I stared at it. Then she said, This is how people end up on true crime podcasts. I set my bag down by the door. Only if one of us starts narrating. She turned to me, eyes sharp. But her mouth betrayed her. Just a little. Almost a smile. Almost. And that was the first moment I realized the retreat was not going to be dangerous because we had to pretend. It was going to be dangerous because part of me already wondered what would happen if Brooke stopped. For the first 10 minutes, we handled the suite like 2 hostage negotiators with carry-ons. Brooke walked straight to the balcony doors, opened them, and let the ocean air rush in like she needed witnesses. I stayed by the dresser because the bed occupied too much of the room emotionally. There's a chair, I said. Brooke glanced at it. It was one of those elegant coastal chairs designed by someone who believed human spines were optional. You are not sleeping in that, she said. I didn't say I was. You were about to become noble and annoying. That is one of my stronger settings, no martyrdom. She turned back from the balcony. We're adults. We can share a room for one night without turning it into folklore. Agreed. And the bed? I looked at the enormous white linen problem. You take it, I said. I'll use the floor. Brooke stared at me. That was martyrdom wearing a different hat. It was practicality. It was dramatic. The floor is fine. Miles, you once complained for 3 days because a hotel pillow lacked conviction. You are not sleeping on tile. I hated that she remembered that. I was under stress. You were in Tampa. Exactly. That almost got a smile. Almost. Then her phone buzzed. She read it, closed her eyes, and said, Martin. Is he apologizing? No. Worse. He's enthusiastic. She turned the screen toward me. Diane loved the dynamic. Dinner tonight at 8. Small table. Just us, her, Martin, and 2 board members. Please keep things warm and natural. I stared at the message. Warm and natural, I repeated. Brooke slid the phone into her pocket. I'm going to feed him to the koi. You found the pond? I asked the bellman on the way up. I should not have laughed. But I did. She looked at me like she wanted to be annoyed and couldn't quite get there. That was dangerous, too. The retreat welcome event started an hour later on the terrace overlooking the beach. The sun was dropping behind the palms. The ocean had gone that deep blue-gray color that makes resorts look more expensive than they are, and everyone wore linen like humidity was a branding exercise. Brooke and I arrived together because Martin had texted the phrase optics matter, which made both of us want to walk into the sea. The problem was that we were good at it. Too good. She slid into the role with terrifying ease. A hand on my arm when Diane approached. A private smile angled my way during introductions. A light touch at my elbow when she corrected one of Martin's overpromises before it left legal damage behind. I matched her because that was what we did. In meetings, in pitches, in arguments that turned into better work. We had always been good together. We had just never been asked to make it look romantic. At dinner, Diane sat across from us and asked the question I had been dreading. So, how did this start? Brooke reached for her water. I reached for mine. Martin went still. Diane smiled. Come on. Office romances never begin as neatly as people pretend. Brooke looked at me. For half a second, I thought she would invent something clean. Instead, she said, he annoyed me first. Diane laughed immediately. I turned to Brooke. That's your opening? It's accurate. It lacks warmth. It has narrative tension. The board members smiled. Martin looked like he might survive dinner after all. Brooke continued. Easier now. Miles challenged a strategy model I had spent 2 weeks building. It had a flaw, I said. It had a preference. It assumed luxury guests wanted to be left alone. They do. They want to feel like they could be left alone. Different thing. Brooke pointed at me with her fork. This is what I mean. Diane's eyes lit up. And you like that? Brooke paused. Just long enough. Then she said, eventually. The word landed somewhere it shouldn't have, because she wasn't looking at Diane when she said it. She was looking at me. I should have made a joke. I didn't. Instead, I said, for the record, she won that argument. Brooke blinked. Diane leaned forward. Did she? She did. I kept my eyes on Brooke. She added a privacy-first arrival sequence, but kept my point about emotional availability. The client loved it. Brooke's expression changed. Only slightly. But I saw it. You remembered that? She asked. Of course. Her mouth softened before she could stop it. And just like that, the fake story had accidentally touched something real. Dinner went dangerously well after that. Diane loved us. Martin relaxed enough to start ordering dessert like a man who had not nearly destroyed 2 employees' lives at check-in. Brooke and I moved through the rest of the evening with the strange ease of people who were pretending, except the pretend kept borrowing facts. She knew I hated coconut. I knew she switched to sparkling water when she was tired, but didn't want people to notice. She corrected my exaggeration about a client meeting. I remembered the exact city where she closed her first solo partnership. By the time we left the terrace, it was nearly 11. The air still warm, music drifting from the pool bar, the ocean black beyond the lights. We walked back toward the elevators in silence. Not awkward. Worse. Thoughtful. At the door of our suite, Brooke stopped with the keycard in her hand. What? I asked. She looked at me. That was too easy. The dinner? The lie. I didn't answer. Because she was right. Inside, the room was dim and silver blue from the moonlight on the water. The champagne had gone untouched in the bucket. The bed still waited in the middle of the room like it had patience. Brooke dropped her key on the dresser and turned toward me. We need rules, she said. Good. I love corporate structure in intimate disasters. 1. No making this weird. Too late, but continue. 2. No jokes if one of us gets uncomfortable. That made me straighten a little. She held my gaze. I mean it. I know. 3. She hesitated. Brooke Turner hesitated. That alone changed the room. 3? I asked. Her voice came out quieter. No pretending tonight didn't feel strange. I looked at her. The balcony curtains moved in the ocean breeze. Somewhere outside, people laughed near the pool. Inside, there was only Brooke, me, and all the things we had been calling rivalry because it was safer than naming anything else. Strange how? I asked. She gave me the kind of look she usually saved for weak pitch decks. Then she said, "Don't make me be the only honest one in the room, Miles." And for once, I had no clever answer ready. I looked at Brooke and realized the worst part was that I knew exactly what she meant. The dinner had felt strange because it had not felt like acting the whole time. It had started that way, sure. The arm touch, the practiced glances, the softened voices whenever Diane looked too interested. All of that was performance. But the rest? The memory of her first major partnership deal. The coconut thing. The way she looked at me when I admitted she had been right in front of clients. That was not fake. That was history we had been filing under professional rivalry because neither of us had a safer drawer for it. So I said, "Fine." Brooke folded her arms. "Fine? You want honesty?" "Fine." I set my jacket over the back of the chair and looked at her properly. Tonight was strange because pretending to like you was much easier than it should have been. She went still. I almost wished I had made the joke instead. Almost. Then she said, "That sounded painful." It was. Good. I stared at her. She shrugged, but there was no real arrogance in it. If I'm suffering, you should at least participate. There she was. That helped. A little. I sat on the edge of the ridiculous resort chair, not the bed, because I was still trying to give the room some kind of moral geography. Brooke moved to the balcony instead. The glass door slid open, and humid ocean air rolled in. Moonlight painted the water in broken silver. The beach below was mostly empty now, except for a few scattered guests walking barefoot near the tide line. She stepped outside. I followed after a second. Not too close. Close enough. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then Brooke said, "Do you know why I compete with you so hard? That feels like a dangerous question." "It is." I leaned one elbow on the balcony rail. "Because I'm brilliant and insufferable?" "Half right. Generous." Her mouth almost curved. Then she looked down at the beach and said, "Because when I joined the firm, every room already liked you." That surprised me. "What?" "Not liked you socially. I mean, professionally. You had history. Trust. People knew how to read you. When you disagreed, they assumed there was a reason." She glanced at me. "When I disagreed, they assumed I was being difficult until I proved otherwise." I didn't answer quickly. Because I could see it once she said it. Not because I had wanted it that way. Because I had benefited from it anyway. Brooke continued, quieter now. "So, yes, I came in sharp. I stayed sharp. I made sure nobody could dismiss me as decorative, emotional, or lucky." "Brooke, no, I know you didn't create that." She looked at me. "But you were the person standing in the spot I wanted. So competing with you gave everyone a reason to take me seriously." The ocean hissed below us. I thought back through 2 years of meetings. Every argument. Every correction. Every time she pushed too hard and I pushed back. I had called it friction. Maybe for her, it had been survival. "I didn't know," I said. "I know. I should have." That made her look at me. Her expression softened, but only slightly, because Brooke did not hand out softness without making sure it had earned a badge. "Maybe," she said, "but I also didn't exactly invite understanding. No, you mostly invited war. It was a very productive war." I smiled. This time, she smiled back. Small. Real. The kind of smile she never gave across conference tables. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Martin. "Tomorrow's session at 10. Diane specifically asked for the couple dynamic exercise. Lean into it." I showed Brooke. She stared at the screen. Then she said, "I'm going to actually drown him. That feels difficult to expense. I'll call it leadership development." I laughed, but she didn't. Not fully, because now the lie was no longer just a dinner problem. Tomorrow, in front of clients and the senior team, we were apparently going to become a case study in romantic professional trust. Beautiful, healthy, completely survivable. We got ready for bed like two people defusing a bomb with toothbrushes. I changed in the bathroom. She changed while I was gone. When I came out, she was wearing soft shorts and an oversized white retreat t-shirt, hair down around her shoulders, face clean of makeup. I looked away too fast. She noticed. Of course she noticed. Miles. What? That was not subtle. I was respecting privacy. You were respecting panic. Both can be true. She rolled her eyes, but her cheeks had warmed just enough to make me feel less alone in the problem. We built a pillow barrier down the middle of the king bed like two adults who had watched too many sitcoms and learned nothing from them. Then we lay down. On opposite sides, very awake. The ocean moved outside. The air conditioner hummed. The white curtains shifted near the balcony door. After 5 minutes, Brooke said into the dark, "This is ridiculous. The barrier? The fact that the barrier is somehow making it worse." I laughed quietly. I wasn't going to say it. You never say the useful thing first. That is objectively untrue. She turned onto her side, facing me across the pillows. I could barely see her in the low light, just the outline of her face and the shine of her eyes. "Tell me something useful now then." I turned to. Bad idea. Necessary one. "Okay," I said. "Tomorrow, we don't let Martin keep escalating this. We do the session, we keep it professional, and after Diane signs or doesn't sign, we tell him the fake couple act is over." Brooke was quiet for a second. "That is useful," she said. "I have moments. But that's not what I meant." I knew that. I hated that I knew that. So I gave her the other useful thing. "I don't think what happened tonight was only fake." She didn't move. Neither did I. Then she whispered, "Neither do I." That was all. No kiss. No dramatic confession. No crossing the pillow border. Just two rivals lying in a resort bed with an ocean outside and a truth between them neither of us could put back into its old shape. The next morning, everything got worse in daylight. The trust design session was held in a bright conference room overlooking the beach, which felt cruel. Nobody should have to discuss vulnerability while watching paddleboarders live freely in the distance. Diane sat in the front row. Martin stood in the back looking aggressively hopeful. Brooke and I ran the workshop together, and the infuriating thing was, we were good. Too good. She handled the emotional architecture. I handled the brand logic. She challenged me. I refined her point. I set up a framework. She made it human. The room responded because the room could feel it. Not the fake relationship. The real trust under the fake one. Halfway through, Diane raised her hand and said, "What do you do when two strong personalities keep mistaking conflict for incompatibility?" Brooke looked at me. I looked at her. The room waited. Then Brooke said, "You ask whether the conflict is actually protecting something both people are afraid to name." Silence. Not awkward. Caught. Diane leaned back, fascinated. I looked at Brooke, and for 1 second, the entire session disappeared. Because I knew she was not only talking about clients. Then Martin stepped forward during the break and murmured, "Excellent. This is exactly what I wanted. Keep selling the relationship angle." Brooke's expression changed. Cold. Fast. "No," she said. Martin blinked. "Excuse me?" "We are not a prop," she said quietly. He glanced at me, then back at her. "Brooke, don't be dramatic." Wrong sentence. Very wrong. I stepped beside her. "She's not being dramatic," I said. "She's being accurate." Martin's face tightened. "Miles, no. You used a misunderstanding because it served the pitch. We played along because correcting it in front of Diane would have been worse. But you don't get to keep pushing it." Brooke looked at me. Not surprised. Something better. Scene. Behind us, Diane's voice came gently from the doorway. "Well," she said, Now this is the first fully honest thing I've heard all morning. And just like that, every carefully managed lie in the retreat walked into the room with us. Diane's sentence landed harder than anything Martin had said all morning. For a second, nobody moved. The conference room was half empty for the break, but not empty enough. A few senior team members were near the coffee station. 2 client-side managers stood by the windows. Martin looked like a man trying to calculate how much truth could fit inside a professional smile. Diane stepped fully into the room, her expression calm but sharper now. "I was beginning to wonder," she said, "where the performance ended." Brooke's shoulders went still beside me. I knew that stillness. It was not fear, it was preparation. Martin recovered first. "Diane, I apologize if there was any misunderstanding. We were simply trying to maintain the flow of the—" "No," Diane said. One word. Very soft. Very final. Martin stopped. She looked at Brooke, then at me. "Were you two asked to pretend you were together?" Brooke answered before I could. "Not directly." Diane's brow lifted. Brooke gave a tight smile, which is corporate for yes. A faint smile touched Diane's mouth. Then her eyes moved to Martin. He tried to laugh. "This has gotten a little more dramatic than it needs to be." Brooke said, "You saw a misunderstanding, realized it benefited the pitch, and encouraged it." Martin's jaw shifted. "I encouraged team cohesion. You booked us into one room. That was the resort error. You let it stand." He looked at me. "Miles, a little help?" There it was. The old expectation. That I would smooth it over. Translate Brooke into something easier. Keep the client comfortable. Save Martin from the consequences of his own convenient lie. I looked at Brooke. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at Martin with a kind of composed fury that had probably gotten her called difficult by men who benefited from her being right. So I said, "No." Martin blinked. "Excuse me?" "No," I repeated. "I'm not helping you make this sound harmless." The room went quiet again. I could feel Brooke turn slightly toward me. I kept my eyes on Martin. "We should have corrected it earlier. That's on us. But you made it useful. That's on you." Diane folded her arms loosely. "And if I had signed the contract because I believed your firm had a charming internal love story attached to its trust framework?" Martin said nothing. Brooke answered. "Then we would have won your business for the wrong reason," she said, "and the work would have started with a lie." That was the sentence that changed Diane's face. Not toward anger. Toward interest. Real interest. She looked at Brooke for a long second. "And yet you both ran the strongest session of the retreat." Brooke's mouth tightened, like she didn't want to accept praise in the middle of an ethical cleanup. Diane turned to me. "Was that fake too?" "No," I said. "That part was real." My voice came out quieter than I expected. Brooke looked at me then. I didn't take it back. Diane noticed, because of course she did. Women like Diane didn't build companies by missing what people tried to hide in plain sight. She gave one small nod. "Good? Then here's what we're going to do. Martin, you and I will have a private conversation after lunch about professional boundaries and why I dislike being emotionally packaged." Her eyes shifted to us. "Brooke, Miles, you will finish the afternoon session." "Without pretending to be anything you are not," Brooke said. "Of course." Diane smiled slightly. "And if the trust between you is real, I imagine it will survive honesty better than performance." Then she left. Martin followed her out 2 steps behind, looking as if the koi pond might have been a gentler fate. The moment the door closed, Brooke turned to the windows. I didn't follow immediately. I gave her a second, then I stepped beside her. The beach below was bright and ordinary. Umbrellas, towels, people walking into the surf like our professional lives hadn't just nearly gone through a paper shredder upstairs. Brooke spoke first. "You didn't have to do that." I almost smiled. "You know, people keep saying that to me lately." She looked at me. "I mean it." "So do I." Her expression shifted, softer at the edges. "You backed me in front of Martin." He was wrong. That has never automatically stopped anyone before. Fair. I leaned one shoulder against the window frame. "You said last night that I had the room before you did." Maybe I did. Maybe I didn't see enough of what that cost you. I held her gaze. I saw it today. Brooke looked down for a second. When she looked back, something had changed. Not the rivalry, something underneath it. Careful, she said quietly. That sounded almost tender. It was strategic tenderness. Terrible phrase. Strong concept. A real smile broke through then. Small, but enough. The afternoon session should have been awkward. It wasn't. It was the best work we had ever done together. Without the fake couple act, we were sharper. Cleaner. Brooke challenged a client assumption about luxury hospitality and emotional fatigue. I built on it instead of competing with it. She corrected one of my examples. I thanked her instead of parrying. The room responded to that more than anything we had done at dinner. Because Diane was right. Trust survived honesty better than performance. By the end of the session, Diane shook both our hands and said, I don't know yet whether we're signing with your firm, but I know which two people I want leading the work if we do. Martin's smile returned from the dead, but weaker. Brooke and I escaped before he could start calling the crisis a learning moment. We ended up on the beach just before sunset, shoes in hand, badges finally removed, walking where the wet sand held our footprints for a few seconds before the tide erased them. For once, we weren't arguing. That felt strange. Good strange. Brooke looked out at the water. I hated lying today. I know. But I didn't hate all of it. I turned toward her. She kept looking at the ocean, but her voice was steady. I didn't hate being beside you. I didn't hate the way we worked when nobody knew where the performance stopped. A pause. And I really didn't hate last night when you admitted it wasn't only fake. My pulse shifted. The sunset made everything too golden, too easy to romanticize. So I tried to stay honest. I didn't hate any of that either. She laughed softly. That is painfully understated. I'm trying not to sound like a retreat exercise. Thank you. We stopped near the waterline. The air was warm. The ocean moved in slow silver lines. Somewhere behind us, music drifted from the pool deck, distant enough not to reach the moment. Brooke turned to face me. Diane asked for honesty, she said. She did. So here it is. Her eyes held mine. I don't think I've only wanted to beat you. That sentence did more damage than any confession with prettier language could have. I stepped closer. Not touching. Not yet. What did you want? I asked. Brooke's mouth curved faintly, but her eyes were serious. I think I wanted you to look at me like I was the only person in the room who could keep up. I swallowed once. That's easy, I said. You usually are. The softness that crossed her face was quick, but I saw it. Then she took one step closer too. And for the first time all weekend, there was no client, no boss, no lie, no room mix-up, no performance. Just Brooke. Me. The truth we had made harder than it needed to be. She said very quietly, if you kiss me right now, Carter, I need it to be because the pretending is over. I looked at her and answered just as quietly, it is. Then I kissed her. Briefly. Carefully. Enough to say what needed saying without turning the beach into a scene we couldn't respect tomorrow. When we pulled apart, she looked almost annoyed. What? I asked. That was very responsible. I can do irresponsible later in a socially acceptable format. That laugh of hers came back. Real this time. And I realized, with alarming clarity, that I wanted to earn that laugh when no one was watching. That night, we still had one room. Still one bed. But everything felt different now. Not easier. Clearer. And clarity, I was learning, could be much more dangerous than the lie. We walked back to the suite in silence. Not awkward silence. The dangerous kind. The kind where both people already know too much, have said just enough, and are now forced to behave like adults in a room with one bed and an ocean view balcony, pretending to be romantic on purpose. Brooke unlocked the door. The champagne was still sweating in the bucket. The curtains moved in the salt air. Somewhere below, people laughed near the pool like they had no idea two fully grown professionals were upstairs trying not to turn a corporate retreat into evidence. Brooke set her shoes by the dresser and looked at the bed. Then at me. Then she said, we need new rules. Probably wise. 1, no pretending the kiss didn't happen. Agreed. 2, no using the retreat as an excuse to make reckless decisions. Also agreed. 3, she paused, and that tiny pause did more damage than a speech. If we do anything else, it has to be because we still want it when we're back in Atlanta. I nodded. Then tonight we don't rush. Her expression softened. Good, she said. I was hoping you'd be annoyingly decent. I contain multitudes. Unfortunately, yes. We did share the bed that night, but not the way Martin's worst HR nightmare would have imagined. And before anyone gets too invested in the ocean breeze, the moonlight, and the fact that two rivals had just kissed on a beach, let me save all of us some legal trouble and skip the part where a less responsible narrator would start lowering his voice. Here's what actually mattered. We talked. For hours. The pillow barrier disappeared, not because of some dramatic moment, but because it was absurd to keep a wall of hotel pillows between two people who had already told the truth. Brooke told me about her first year at the firm, how many times she'd rehearsed her points before meetings because she knew one uncertain word would cost her twice as much as it cost me. I told her about the pressure of being the reliable one so long that reliability had started to feel like a trap. At some point, around 2 a.m, she fell asleep facing me with one hand tucked under her cheek. I stayed awake a little longer than I should have. Not because I was tempted to ruin anything. Because for the first time all weekend, the quiet didn't feel like performance. It felt peaceful. The next morning, Brooke woke up first. I know because I opened my eyes and found her looking at me with a face that was softer than anything she had ever allowed in a conference room. What? I asked, voice rough. She blinked like I had caught her stealing. Nothing. That was not nothing. She sighed. I was just thinking. Dangerous. That you look less irritating when you're asleep. I smiled. Romance is alive. She laughed softly, then went quiet again. Outside, the sun was already bright over the water. The whole room looked different in daylight. Less dramatic. More honest. Brooke sat up, pulling the sheet around herself over her retreat t-shirt. We still have to go downstairs. We do. And Martin is still going to be Martin, unfortunately. And Diane may still decide not to sign. She might. Brooke looked at me. And us? That was the real question. I sat up too. Us, I said, starts with breakfast. Then the closing session. Then when we get back to Atlanta, I take you to dinner without a client, without Martin, without a fake relationship, and without a room assignment doing emotional labor for us. Her mouth curved. You've thought about this. I had 8 hours and a lot of ocean noise. That sounds like strategy. It is. I like strategy. I know, she smiled then. Not a retreat smile. Not a client smile. Brooke's real smile. The one I was starting to suspect I'd been trying to earn for 2 years by pretending I only wanted to beat her. Downstairs, Martin tried once to pull us aside before breakfast. Brooke looked at him and said, no, just that one word. I nearly proposed to her on the spot, which would have been fast even by fake couple standards. Diane signed with our firm 2 weeks later. Not because of the lie, because of the work. In her final email, she wrote that she wanted the 2 people who stopped performing and became more trustworthy because of it, leading the account. Martin called that a great outcome. Brooke called it accidental accountability. I called it the first time I saw our firm reward the truth after trying very hard to profit from a lie. Back in Atlanta, things moved carefully. Not slowly in the cowardly sense. Carefully in the respectful sense. We told HR before the office grapevine could do what office grapevines do. Martin got a very formal conversation with leadership about boundaries, client ethics, and why employees are not props with badges. Brooke was promoted to Director of Partnerships. I moved into a senior strategy role under a different executive, which meant we could still fight over ideas without making everyone in compliance sweat. And we did fight. Beautifully. Professionally. Sometimes in meetings, Brooke would dismantle one of my assumptions with a sentence so clean it deserved its own stationery. Then, afterward, she'd pass by my desk and murmur, "Still keeping up, Carter?" And I'd say, "Try making it harder, Turner." The junior staff stopped being afraid of us after a while. Mostly. 6 months later, we went back to Hilton Head. Not for a retreat. For a weekend. Same resort. Different room. 2 key cards. 1 honest reservation. At check-in, the clerk asked, "King bed?" Brooke looked at me sideways. I said, "Seems less dangerous when nobody's lying." She smiled and said, "King." That night, we walked the beach again. No badges, no clients, no fake dynamic exercise. Just her hand in mine and the sound of the tide moving in. A year and a half later, Diane invited us to the opening of the first resort we built under the new project. Brooke stood beside me in the lobby looking at the finished space, warm, elegant, human, and whispered, "We're good together." I looked at her. "Professionally?" She smiled. "Don't make me be the only honest one in the room." So I kissed her. Briefly, responsibly. Mostly because Diane was watching and looked far too pleased with herself. 2 years after the retreat, I asked Brooke to marry me on a quiet stretch of beach just after sunrise. No team-building exercises, no champagne bucket, no Martin. Just the two of us, the tide, and the woman who had once been my rival looking at me like she already knew my answer before I finished asking. She said yes. Then immediately said, "For the record, I still think you overused the phrase emotional architecture." I told her I could live with that. And I meant it. Because in the end, the strangest part was not that we had to pretend we were together. It was how little pretending it took. What would you have done if your work rival and you had to pretend you were together at a beach retreat, and then the fake relationship started feeling more honest than the rivalry ever did? And have you ever had someone you competed with become the person who understood you best? Tell me your story in the comments. If you like this one, leave a like.